Hello and welcome everyone to the Mel Carmine Show. I'm your host, Elisa V. And today we've got a special guest. We bring back Mr. Larry Ballard, and he's going to join us for a pretty deep dive into the greatest transfer of wealth, which we are on the verge of. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing great, Elisa.
Good. So before we begin, I just want to remind everyone to please tune in weekly every Monday at 4 o'clock Eastern for the forecast with Mel Carmine, Laura Eisenhower, Mike Barra, and myself. And you can catch us live on Rumble at XRPQFSTeam, as well as on X and YouTube at Elisa V Unscripted. And just a few announcements. Don't forget to look in the description box. We've got some of our great sponsors, including Carmine's Gold. If you're looking for crypto needs, please feel free to contact Mel or myself directly, and we can put you in touch with our brokers. Remember that there's a minimum of $10,000 purchase on that, and the direct phone numbers are down below in the description box to contact either of us. And let's also not forget that we're going through tough times right now. There's a lot of chaos. If you're having trouble, you need extra support, you can always reach out to me for my coaching support at elisavalentino.com. Now, Larry, we have got quite a show, but as you know, Mel is producing an amazing documentary right now called Dear Mr. President, which tackles head on the problem of censorship that's affecting every aspect of our world. And this documentary was made to educate about the problem, and it's a plea to our president to help put an end to the war on freedom of speech. So I'm going to just show a very quick trailer of this exciting video, and which can be found at dearmrpresident.net. So I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to watch this, and then we're going to dive deep into the topic at hand today.
Dear Mr. President.
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 Dear Mr. President, when did freedom of speech become a crime? In the land of the free, voices are vanishing, opinions are policed, truth is under fire. They say it's about safety, I say it's about silence. Who's watching the watchmen? Who's filtering your feed? Who benefits from your silence? From the classroom to the newsroom, from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C., who decides what you can say?
Censorship.
Censorship. Censorship.
The censorship.
Censorship. It's a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years.
Our First Amendment is under assault, not just by big tech, but by government agencies. Voices are being silenced.
A world without censorship would mean we can freely expose the elections and, of course, child trafficking. I believe the American spirit would kick in if they had access to the real information.
We've had channels taken down from nearly every form of social media. We knew when you uttered the term fake news that you were up to something different. We're honored to contribute to this documentary on censorship.
I have only one thing to ask. I just only want to see some accountability from somebody. Just pull that pin and throw that grenade already, buddy. That's all every American wants to see, is just some accountability for the crimes against us all. Thank you, sir. And long live the Republic.
Was that the first time you've seen the trailer?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say, let's hope. Let me give you a personal example. I now have my own platform, and I'm on Rumble. And for a guy like me, it's quite an announcement. I'm on YouTube, and I haven't been kicked off. I haven't gotten any strikes yet. and I'm still speaking the truth just like I was. So what I think is happening is I think behind the scenes quietly without people knowing it, um, money is being pumped into our enemy's camp, and we're getting control little by little over the media outlets. And I do see that there's less censorship going on than there was. There has to be more, and I'm excited to hear what Mel is going to disclose, but there's hope. So I'm going to make a real quick plug for myself since we're on that topic. My new show is just launched. It's kicking off really strong. It's Liberty Crusade Official, and it's on both YouTube and on Rumble. Go check it out. So let's get into today's story, and we'll see what we can tell these people that might benefit them. I'll
Absolutely.
throw it back to you to kick it off.
So, what we're really talking about today, and I'm going to kind of use it under this banner, how is God trying to help bless his chosen people? I think that is kind of the overarching theme of what we're talking about. And of course, once again, you've put together a beautiful presentation full of slides that tell the story and walk us through the narrative that you're going to be educating and informing us about. So, let's just get into it. Would you like me to bring up the slides so we could begin the conversation, or is there anything you want to say to
No, I thought
start
we
with?
just sat here all day and talk. Yeah, bring them up, of course. So yes, please.
Okay, so here we are. I'm going to do a little screen share. All
Well,
right.
while she's bringing it up to echo what Elisa's saying, God told me, I've told you, anybody who's ever seen me knows that basically I died in 68 and I've been on this journey forever. And I want to share with you something that maybe you've never heard me say. All the way back in 1968, God showed me the time would come when my hair was salt and pepper and America would be morally collapsed and on the brink of financial collapse. And that's when he'd bring me out to deliver the message that I have. But just the other day, he came to me and said, "You got to do this show and a couple of others because here's where we're at." He said, "I've been telling the people that this was coming. I'm telling them in my word that there's a transfer of wealth coming, and many of them are not paying attention. They don't believe in me, in supernatural events, and they're going to miss this. So that's why this is called coming soon, the transfer of wealth. Don't miss it." So what God basically said to me a few days ago is, I want you to give an alarm. I want you to go out and I want you to tell the people he's leaving the 99 who've already figured it out, who've already listened and heard his word, who've already invested. I'm going to leave them for a minute and I'm going to go find the one out there, the one lost lamb, and I'm going to give him the opportunity to basically invest. And what this is about is what God told me to do is there's lots of people, the people who have money are paying attention. They've already invested. They're already ready for this. But the people who don't have much money, it's hard for them to want to let go of a few dollars to invest in something that to them things supernatural that they're not sure it's going to happen. So what we're going to do today is break this thing down and show you in realistic terms it's happening and nothing's going to stop it. And you have an opportunity to invest just the smallest amount of money to maybe become a millionaire. So with that, let's get into the nitty gritty.
All right. So, and I want to just add a little something to this. And then I have a question before we get into it. But I've been aware of this I guess there's been people that have been aware of this for decades, right? Because this is not something necessarily new in terms of the concept of it. But for myself, I guess I've been involved maybe now for about 5 years. I've sort of known what is to come. I was very aware of a lot of what is in store for a lot of us in terms of wealth and abundance and part of where we're going. But why do you think that so many people are not aware of this? Like, if you could kind of nutshell it, what do you think? Why do you think we know about it and others don't?
Because Mel Carmine's movie hasn't come out yet.
Good point.
Bottom line is we're lied to every day. And basically we've got people telling us things from, all over every direction. And at the best, we're getting a little bit of the truth mixed with a lie, and we're confused and we don't know what it is. And it's just hard for people who are barely making ends meet, working like dogs. And all of a sudden we're going to say that this tiny little investment you can make you a millionaire. And if what you have to do to believe that is you have to get a foundation with God that says you have to believe in those things that are not as though they were. And so that's what this is about. This is about to make this transfer of wealth tangible for people so that they can look at it. If they don't have enough faith right now, we're going to build their faith by giving them a foundation of facts so that maybe they'll step out and they'll make this investment. And then guess what happens? When that happens, with what they thought was not possible becomes possible. And when they come from being financially strapped to having wealth, I hope that what they do is they step back and say, thank you, Lord. And they recognize that there are signs, there are wonders, there are miracles, and God has planned this from the foundation of time. And basically now is that time. All the indicators are there. People have looked for this since we bombed Vietnam, since we went into the Iraq War. And it's taken all this time to set the foundation to have this happen. And it's taken the last 4 years to go drip, 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 to open our eyes enough that we were ready for all the myriad of miracles that are coming. So now's the time. Now's the time, and God is going to show us the way.
Okay. So let's take a look. I'm gonna queue up this next slide, which I think kind of begins it. And I'm gonna just let you go, and I'm gonna, bring in some questions as we proceed.
Here's what I'm doing. I'm assuming that the audience that I'm appealing to here is not the sophisticated audience that bought XRP when it was 30 cents. It's not the audience that has, like my son, sold his house in order to get money to invest. It's not that audience. It's the audience that's skeptical. So what I'm going to say to you is, well, let's look at a little balance scale, and let's look at what I call risk-reward ratio. So what we're seeing is there's several currencies that are going to revalue. We'll get into them later. And the gold and silver, gold's already 3,000. Silver is going to break away, be untethered from gold at some point and go up. And XRP is going to tether away. And basically we're looking at a situation where Bitcoin is just about reached its current high. And I think that people are going to take profits. They're going to break that away, and they're going to do an altcoin season. So even the cryptos that sell for a fraction of a penny are going to go up. Now they're going to come back down again, but God's giving people all kinds of opportunities with very little amounts of money to get into this. So we're going to walk you through how you can take just the smallest amount of money and invest it and make a profit. And then as we go through this, it's going to be in several steps, as we talked before we started. You can take that money, get the money you invested back, and now you can invest it in another currency that's going to revalue, or you can invest it in an altcoin, or then you can go invest it in silver, and then you can go invest it in XRP and XLM. So what God is giving us, and each time we do that, and each time God prospers it, hopefully our faith grows. Before this is over, we want to see a dynamic change in the whole planet. It starts with America. And what better way to build people's faith to show them that he's a promise keeper. He said he was going to deliver a transfer of wealth that was like none other. This is not going to be like the Exodus with Egypt. This is not for one nation. This is for the world. So here's the opportunity that I picked for you to spotlight. It could have been the dinar, but basically they're ready to pop. They're going to transfer too, but it costs more. Basically, a lot of my people have been following that for a long time. So I picked the dong because it's cheap, because it gives those people who are afraid to make a risk an opportunity. I got off the phone with my sister today. It took me half an hour to convince her to risk $60 to maybe make 2 million. So I'm assuming I'm talking to some people like that out there. So what we're going to do in the succeeding slides is we're going to show you this isn't pie in the sky. This isn't conspiracy theory. And now if you get interested, this slide is going to be repeated at the end. But let me tell you, if you're lucky enough to have a bank in your area that sells what they call junk currency, which is what the dinar no longer considered right now, I pick it up for $60 for $1 million, and then I pay a $7 fee. If you aren't able to find a local bank, you can go to a currency exchange, but they're going to charge you more. And if you can't find either one of those, you can go to capital X changeofamerica.com and you can pick it up there. But either way, whatever, I don't buy from those other sources. I can only tell you what I pay. So it's not going to be a whole lot of money. And you might be able to buy for $60, in my case, $1 million worth of dong. And the numbers that I'm hearing passed around are a minimum of $2 for the revaluation to $371. I'm using the lowest number. So I just want you to look at this and say, over in that scale on the left, you've just laid $60 down. And on the other scale, if what God is promising us happens, there will mysteriously appear $2 million.
Well,
Who
Larry,
wouldn't
we're
take a
saying
risk?
mysteriously, but it's not really, it's not mysterious. I mean, there's a very specific financial explanation of how this happens. And we're going to get into that to talk about why are these quote unquote junk currencies that they're called, why are they junk currencies? How did that happen? Why did it happen? And then now we're looking at the prospect that these nations whose currencies have been devalued are now going to revalue. So it's not mystery. It's very hardcore finance. That's what it is. You revalue a currency, it's going to have greater value.
And we're going to tell you why. We're going to tell you that the governments of the world have to win or it doesn't happen. We're going to walk you through so that when this is done, it won't seem like skepticism. So basically, here's your alarm. Don't wait. Don't miss out. And now we're going to get into the details to tell you why, little by little, I'm hoping to walk you through every slide. You believe it a little bit more. Maybe you go when you think about it overnight, and then maybe you go and pull the trigger and you give God an opportunity to keep his promise and to bless you. And especially if you consider yourself to be a Christian, he's out there holding his hand out saying, come, follow me, take my hand, let me prosper you. Let me show you that I'm the God Almighty who can do anything. Let's go to the next slide. And now we're going to start setting the foundation for what has to happen. And maybe you've made these connections, maybe you haven't. But let's go back to the lockdown in 2020. Here's where the bad guys started to trigger what they called their reset. It's backfiring, and we're going to show you that. But what has to happen is they locked everybody down, and then every nation in the world printed more money than they had printed in decades, maybe in 100 years. And that caused inflation, right? And so now what has to happen is we have to break the control of the global financial elite and get our freedom. So the first thing that has to happen is we have to have de-globalization. So is that happening? Yes. And where do we look to see if it's happening? You have to look any further than China. Basically, the manufacturing powerhouse of the world is losing its manufacturing faster than you can shake a stick. And it's going to multiple countries. And why? Because we have to break the logistics lock that controls us so they can control the cost of oil and the supply of food and basically control us and manipulate us. So one of the nations that's really, really, really benefiting from that is Vietnam. And that's why the currency is going to revalue. So we'll get into that in detail. But now, so the whole world says we don't want to be controlled by a logistics network controlled by a communist nation called China. But the whole world is also saying, well, America, we let you be the world's reserve currency at an event called Bretton Woods following World War II when all the currencies were destabilized and you had your manufacturing intact and you had a lot of gold. So we let you be the world's reserve currency, but you abused it. You printed money to ad nauseum, which devalued our currencies. And then if any nation dared do anything you didn't want them to do, you sanctioned them. What did you do to Russia? What did you do to China? What did you do to Iran? And they say, we don't want that. So a whole bunch of nations formed what's called BRICS, and they're basically going away from the fiat system to currencies backed by gold. And so we're devaluing, we're basically deglobalizing and de-dollarizing, which gives, for the first time in my lifetime, sovereignty to all the nations of the world, or the opportunity to have sovereignty, because you don't have a nation if you don't have control of your border, and you don't have a nation if you don't have control of your money. And there's a saying that says that he who controls money controls the world. But let's take it a little deeper. Where does the money come from? The money that you get comes from something very tangible. You have to have natural resources. You take those and you manufacture something. You sell it. That brings the money that causes your GDP, that controls your economy. Well, right now, that money is going to the bad guys who control the Fed and they print a dollar, and every time they print that dollar, it's just a decimal point in a computer, but it creates a bond, and that bond they create creates a debt obligation, and so we can never get out of debt. This system has to collapse because every dollar they print, every war they take us into, every unfair trade deal that they put us in takes that debt up, and it's reached a point where every major nation in the world is near bankruptcy. That's Britain, that's Japan, that's China, that's Russia, that's the United States. That's the Great Reset. It's going to fall, and it's going to fall so that it benefits mankind. And that's what we're going to get into as we go into this. So basically, everything is changing. You got a
Yeah.
question or a comment, I can
actually
tell.
have a comment, which may lead to a question, but you know what I think people don't understand, and one of the things we're here to explain to them is that I think it's a very scary comment when people hear, you know, the collapse of the economy, the collapse of the dollar, right? What they need to understand is that, which of course you know very well, and I've come to know, that through the years, part of what the major plan has been for the central banks to come in and control. So in our country, we have the Federal Reserve, which is not federal and there is no reserve, and it's a private bank. And so when you look throughout the world, the central bank, right, that runs throughout the world have looked to go to a lot of these countries with natural resources and said, we want to come in there. We want you to be part of our basically debt system, control your economy. And when these countries refused or did not have the power to fight against that, you know, the powers that be would go in and basically rape their nations basically of all their natural resources, collapse their economy. I mean, these nations that we have grown up, like in Africa and different parts of Asia, saying how poor they are, these people didn't just get poor. You know, they were made poor. And with all the natural resources that they have, they should have been the richest in the world, right? So, what we're trying to explain to people right now is that this collapse is not a collapse for the average American to go broke. It is a collapse of a system that has kept us in debt and kept most of the world in debt. And so the only way we can reap this beautiful gift that God is giving us through this revaluation, through these economies and currencies throughout the world, is for the system that has been in control to collapse so that the new one can take hold. And I think what anybody who's watching this who's not as in the know by studying this needs to understand that this is a good thing, because right now the central banking system benefits those that are in charge and the rich. While all of us work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to put food on the table and provide our families with shelter, in this new system that you're going to be telling people about, we're looking at an opportunity for people to be able to now benefit, live in prosperity, in abundance, and just enjoy being creators in this world and helping one another, which is what we're here to do. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on what I just said.
Well, I mean, that is what's happening. I can kind of give you a go off script here a little bit. I'll give you an example. So basically, what we're having is a new Britain Wood. For those who don't know history, we came out of World War II, and all the nations of the world, their manufacturing had been decimated, and there was no stable economy in the world except one, America, because we hadn't had our factories bombed and we had more gold than anybody. And so they came to us, and this is what's happening now. And they said, we can't have international trade because there's no currencies that are stable. America, will you be the world's reserve currency? And we said yes, but we abused it because we printed money to ad nauseum, which devalues their currencies, and because we leveraged our control of the currency over the nations. So now that's being taken away from us. But there's a plan here. The plan is when these events happen, the Dutch, going way back to the colonial era, they were, for a period of time, they had control of the world's reserve currency. Then it went to England. They had control of the world's reserve currency. Now I want you to see the genius of Trump and the hand of God. When they lost the control of the world's reserve currency, they had a 10-year catastrophic financial depression. That's not what's going to happen in America. I want you to feel comfortable, folks. There's a plan here. What Donald Trump is doing, we're going to get into details in one of these slides, is the system has to fall because that's the only way we get out of the debt system and can transfer over from the fiat currency to a commodity-backed system based on God's system. But he's put in a plan that's going to bring us up, down, and right back up again. Bam, bam. And when we come up, we're going to be free. And so as we get into this, we'll go into details that are going to show you how that phenomena is going to happen. How America's not going to have a 10-year depression, but a quick rebound. And Donald Trump is going to fulfill his promise to make America greater than ever. And God is going to fulfill his promise to transfer the wealth from the wicked to the righteous. So let's go to the next slide and we'll see exactly how all of that's going to happen. So if you pull that next one up, I was talking about this without the slide up. So over on the left, I've already kind of gotten into it. Money is created by having natural resources, which you pointed out the third world nations have, but we kept them from capitalizing on it because we didn't allow them to build the infrastructure. They didn't have the roads, they didn't have the highways, they didn't have the seaports. And so we went in and said, oh, we're so nice. We first world countries will buy your natural resources. And we'll steal it from you for pennies on the dollar and hold you in poverty. So now the natural resources get manufactured, they then are sold, and that becomes the genesis of wealth, and that becomes the power that controls the world. And that in the system that's enslaving us now, that becomes the way they control our education system. They control the media, which is what Mel's film is about. That's how they buy the banks. That's how they buy the corporations. That's how they buy the politicians. That's how they control us. We're going into a new system where that control mechanism doesn't allow them to create inflation and deflation and wage suppression and volatility all over the place. It's going to be a system that's stable. So let's go to the other side and look back at the criteria that we started to develop. For that to happen,
Am I going
peace
back?
and prosperity. No, I'm just going to the other side of the slide.
Okay,
But
got it. Sorry.
But it starts off with something we talked about before. So in order to usher in that period of peace and prosperity, what do we have to have? Just what we started with, de-globalization and de-dollarization. And then what has to happen? We have to have international parity on terms of the dollar. So basically what's going to happen, there's a slide in here, all of the first world nations that have committed hegemony against the third world nations, our currencies are going to go down. But as we go to Africa and we go to portions of India and so forth, and they get access to their natural resources, here's what they're doing in Africa. That is, again, positioning this where this can happen, is basically what they're doing is saying, we know history. We go back and we look at what happened in 1973, and we see a blueprint to make us rich. Well, what's that blueprint? They see where Saudi Arabia raised their hand to the world and said, we got you. We got something you need worse than you need us. And basically we got your oil. And they had an oil embargo. And I was old enough that I was driving. So you go to the gas station, there was a mile-long line, and you could buy gas on even or odd days based on what your license plate number was. And guess what happened? They took control of their own destiny, and now they're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. That's what Africa's doing. That's what other third world nations are going to do. That's what's going to trigger this. So what's Africa done? Africa has made some astounding announcements. They've said recently, you know what, it's going to take us a while, but we're breaking down all of our borders and we're going to become like the United States, kind of like a United States of Africa. And you know what else we're going to do? We're going to basically go to a cryptocurrency. So they got together and they said, all right, let's all these nations pool our gold and let's go on a commodity-backed system. Let's have a gold-backed currency and issue our own sovereign currency. And then they're not under the central bank. And you talked before about the central banks, and it was a little more pervasive than I think you alluded to. What happens is they start a war. And they drive that nation into war, and that nation collapses. And systematically through war, over time, they have collapsed every nation in the world. There's only one major nation that isn't under the central bank of the globalist. That's Russia. So they're the only major nation that we might say has sovereignty. But now all those countries in Africa that have gotten together and pooled their gold and issued their own sovereign gold-backed system and are not under the central banking system, they're getting their freedom, they're getting their sovereignty, and therefore their currencies are going to revalue. Now they're doing something else. So they're part of BRICS, which is putting pressure, downward pressure on the dollar. But we're not going to have that catastrophic, unrecoverable event that Britain had, because Donald Trump has a plan, and I think it was inspired to him by God. So what's going to happen now is they're also saying, you know what we're going to do? This is going to be a digital world. We're announcing that we have put the infrastructure together so that we're going to go paperless, more or less. So basically, you can now go in all across Africa. You'll be able to cross from one country to the other, just like you do in the United States, and you'll be able to pay for things with this electronically. So basically, we're going into a digital age, and they're preparing for it. So all the groundwork is set for all the nations of Africa to rise. It's set for Vietnam to rise. It's set for we'll get into it. All the whole system, they're all going to be based on the same foundation. There are criteria, and as each one of these nations meet that list of criteria, it can check all those boxes. Their currencies will revalue. The two that are most likely to revalue right now are Vietnam and Iraq, and maybe a little information back and forth, but maybe the Zimbabwe. And then the others will come when they meet the criteria. So that's what you got to have right there. That's all got to happen. Let's go to the next one, and we're going to take it now from the broad picture to the individual nation. Each individual nation whose currencies revalues has to check every one of these boxes. And when you do, you not only qualify to have your currency revalued, but it's actually painful to first world countries if you don't. Now, what in the world does he mean by that? Well, if you're Vietnam and you got an economy that's chunking away 6% growth, I mean, and just really, really doing good, but your currency is way, way, way down, that means you have a huge advantage because your products are cheaper than almost anybody's. And so that's stoking your internal growth. But we want everybody on parity, because it's like, oh, there was a general, let's see now, I think his name was Eisenhower, and he became a president, and he should know because he served in both offices. He said, is there any man, is there any woman, is there any child who doesn't know the central cause of war is the lack of parity between nations? When one nation's real rich and the other nation's real poor, there's angst and there's war. So basically, that's all going to change. So this is the criteria, if we're talking about Vietnam, that Vietnam can check every one of these boxes. So let's go through it. Stable growth. Their growth rate is 6% GDP. They're growing faster right now than the United States. Quite a bit faster. They're having the kind of growth that China had when money was flowing into China. So what's happening in Vietnam? So China is being gutted. They say by the end of the year, 95% of China's manufacturing will be stripped away. Well, where is the first place it's going to go? It's going to go to the neighboring nations that are ethnically similar and that are geographically close, so they don't have a lot of cost in transporting. And then it's going to come to countries like us later, because it's more costly to come here, but they're going to come here to America because we make things that other nations can't make. We're the high-tech center of the world. So basically, they have a super fast-growing economy. All right, reserve assets. They don't have a whole lot of debt like America has. So they got another check mark. Stable government. You're not seeing any massive instability in Vietnam. So that's another check mark. Current military conflicts. There are none right now. So it's a peaceful society right now. Another check mark. Adequate infrastructure. Well, before Trump left the first time, he gave him a bunch of money to build infrastructure because he knew what was coming. And what did he just do now? He just signed a major deal on trade with who? With Vietnam and with their neighbor, India. So basically, another check mark. So basically, America is seeing that the money is going to go to Vietnam, but it's also going to come to America because what Trump is doing. So they get another check mark. Manufacturing capability. If you go to Vietnam, it's not like what it looked like in the 60s. They got gleaming cities. They got modern factories. Now they have one of the youngest, what are societies suffering from in terms of demographics? Japan, old people. China, old people. America, not having enough children to basically replace our population. They have one of the youngest populations in the world. And because of that, guess what? Their labor rates are less than in China. And they have a lot of gold. And because of where they are climatically, they have a lot of agricultural capability. Do you see ka-ching, 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 ka-ching? They're stable.
Yeah.
They're going to be a major regional power in Asia, period. They already are. And they're really growing now at lightning fast speed because they're the recipients of what's happening, unfortunately, with China and with its economy collapsing. And now I'm going to go back and tell you something that isn't in the mainstream yet, but the source that I got it from, I believe, pretty credible. So I'm going to put a supposedly in front of this, okay? Let's go back to, I always tie the Bible history. Let's go back to 1933. And in 1933, we were deep in the heart of the Depression, and the stock market had fallen 90%. And basically, America declared bankruptcy. And so what happened? Basically, we were penniless. So we got to basically, that's what's happening now. That's one of those reset points, right? So we had to reset the economy. So what did we say? We said, hey, America, we got an idea. We'll just take your gold and we'll take your silver and we'll rifle all of the deposit boxes in the banks. And oh, guess what? If you don't give us your gold, then we're going to give you a gift of 10 years in prison or $10,000 fine. So they took that gold and they used it to create what? To get out of bankruptcy and create a new economy. That's what we're going through right now.
Well,
That's the
let's not also
process.
forget they did some other things too, which we don't really have the time to get into, but they also used us, us as human collateral, which is a whole other conversation we could have through the birth
Well,
certificate.
that goes all the way back to colonial time, and I think we're better to stick with current times. So that'll all fall apart when basically this new system happens and we're out from under their central control mechanism, which is the central bank. And so, I mean, yes, that's true, but I think it might dilute our conversation from here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right, so let's see, where were we? So we're just checking off chains, international trade agreements. So what's happening in Vietnam? So they've got a huge domestic market that they're selling to. So that's ka-ching, ka-ching for their environment, right? And then guess what? They just did a deal with us, right? They're dealing deals with all over the places. The manufacturing capability comes in. They have to have somebody to sell it to. And remember, right now, their economy, their currency is really super cheap. So people are wanting to do business with them because they're getting those things for nothing. So basically, they've got a very low debt. They've got a strong domestic market. They've got a strong international market. They've got strong manufacturing. They've got agriculture. They've got all kinds of minerals. They've got all kinds of gold. They're a booming country. Why not reevaluate? And it actually helps the first world countries because now the currencies are more on parity. So I say there is nothing going to stop Vietnam from refinancing, from revaluing. And then you go to the dinar. I'm going to spend less time on that. But here's the central thing. They're loaded with mineral, gold and oil and diamonds and so forth. And they've done what the rest of Africa is doing. They said, you're not going to take our crude oil anymore. So they're pumping their oil now. And they're saying, we're shipping it out as refined oil. And so basically, all the criteria is set for those two nations. And when we get to Zimbabwe, I don't know if it's quite ready to go yet. They are arguably the wealthiest single nation in the world. Gold, copper, uranium, cobalt, lithium, you name it. They're a cornucopia of rare earth minerals. So basically, if they don't go in this wave, they're going to go in the next wave. So folks, that's your plan. Now, here's what you got to do.
So I want to
Every
just,
nation,
for clarity, for anybody who doesn't understand, you said if they don't go in this wave, they'll go in the next wave. Could you just speak to that very quickly? You're talking about the fact that all of these junk currencies or these undervalued currencies that exist, that the revaluation of them, where you're talking about where we're trying to build some kind of parity or close to it, if it's $2 or $3 of what the value is going to be when it revalues, right? So if you pay, $60, your conversation about how it might be worth 2 million, et cetera. However, I think the important thing for people to understand is that this isn't going to be like a light switch. It's going to be where it's going to kind of go one after the other. So you may have a number of these undervalued currencies in these countries. We're talking about maybe in the first, what they've called basket, or the first ones to revalue might be the Vietnamese dong, the Iraqi dinar, and then of course possibly the Zimbabwe Zim. So I just wanted to, what that means. And then, of course, you have other devalued currencies like the Bolivar in Venezuela or in some of the other countries. And so that wave may come in a second wave. That's pretty much what you meant, correct?
Where I was going is to refer you back to this graphic and say, so this set of criteria must be met by every one of those nations before they can revalue. So we have gone through and said, hey, Vietnam meets every one of those criteria. So does Iraq, and so soon I think will the Zim. So basically, when you go to the Bolivar, why isn't the Bolivar revaluing right now? Because there's political instability within the nation, and because they don't have as diverse an economy as Vietnam does. So we're going to get to a slide that's going to show you all the third world countries that are going to revalue, and all they have to do is meet this criteria. So now you've gone to the next slide, and guess what? There are powers in this world. You're not going to believe this, but they don't let things happen unless they benefit. So there have been people who've tried to take us and put us on a gold standard. Does the name Kennedy come to mind? Except he was a silver standard. He had actually printed currency and circulated and was getting rid of the Fed, taking the power away from the CIA and taking away the power from the military industrial complex, and they wouldn't let him happen. That happened. They killed him. So why all of a sudden are we allowing BRICS? And nation after nation has joined, and we haven't seen one leader of one of those BRICS nations have even an attempted what's the word I want? Assassination attempt, because something has happened. Basically, what's happened is we're going to release new technology, because when we go to this crypto-based market and we're mining Bitcoin and we're doing what we're doing, the energy requirements for the world to have this new financial system are going to double or triple. And so when that happens, all of a sudden, they don't have any choice. They have to give us some 6,000 patents that we can basically create the greatest industrial revolution that's ever happened, and they have to let this reset happen. And so I see you want to say something, but then we'll go on and break this down further, and you'll see that the nations have to win, and they will, or this doesn't happen. So there's two things. First, the nation has to qualify, and then the bullies who run the world have to allow them to do it. So go ahead.
So what I want to say, and I think this might be a really good segue, and I know this show isn't necessarily about NESARA and GESARA, but for anybody who's not aware, and I know Mel's audience, my audience, they're pretty sophisticated, but of course our goal is to get this out to the less knowledgeable and enlighten and educate other people. And so for anybody who hasn't heard about it, we've got this National Economic Security and Recovery Act, and then the Global Economic Security and Recovery Act. And what most people don't know is that there are certain tenets of this act, which, ironically was signed into law. The story has it supposedly that, Clinton had a gun held to his head by the military, which the NESARA Act actually began with the farmers, and I'm sure we could do a whole, show on that. But it was signed on October 10th, 2000. And I'm sorry, it was signed in I think that's when we were supposed to look towards September 11th, 2001, when a lot of this was supposed to be announced. Now, under that, there are many things. I don't know if it's 20 or, if you kind of push it all together, maybe. And under that, it talks about all of what you have been saying, what is required in the world for this transfer of wealth to happen, how there is going to be all nations can't be at war, how we need to take a look at a lot of the suppression that has taken place with, as you said, 6,000 patents, right? Which includes everything, but the ones that get talked about a lot are free energy. We talk about healing modalities like the med beds and frequency machines that can actually heal every disease and reset us and de-age us and, get rid of trauma and all these other things. And that's just kind of, scraping the surface, right? Because there's so many technologies that are out there that are going to make us have, better lives and live the way we're supposed to. So I think it's a good time to talk about this because a lot of what myself and Mel and our group talk about when we go on is saying that a lot of what we're seeing, they're not coming out and saying, "Oh, we're implementing NESARA now." But there's all these things and all these pieces that we can look to and say, that is a part of NESARA. Like you said,
Building that puzzle right now as we do this presentation, and the presentation ends by showing you that we completed the puzzle.
yeah.
That what you're talking about is now ready to also pop it. It's at the end of the process. We go in stages, a little bit at a time, and then we end up at the destination that you're talking about.
Exactly. And like I said, it's a process. It's not a switch flip. And so when we look at what's going on, let's say with DOGE, right, Department of Government Efficiency, we can see, and Mel always affectionately calls it Department of GESARA, because what we're seeing is how there is a disclosure, there is taking down a lot of the corruption that happened, and it's releasing money and funds and lots of other things that people can actually look at, and it makes sense in their mind, where these funds are coming from. But as you and I are talking about, these funds are coming from a multitude of things that are happening around the world. And what we're going to get into a little bit more in terms of this de-globalization, in terms of putting forth now, rebuilding the economies around the world and having everyone have a sovereign currency, the parity that's happening. But if we kind of had to put it in a box, we would say it's really all part of what NESARA and GESARA are all about, and a lot of what people will see, and it's rolling out in this way, which to me is one of the most exciting things. So just wanted to add that. Would you like me to go back to the slides now?
Yeah, we're going to get it drill down in that bullet point by bullet point when we get to the end.
Okay.
So you just said the precursor for where we're going. So yeah, let's go back because I need people to understand there are people who keep us from doing things, and unless they allow us to do them, it doesn't happen. So go back to that slide again, and here's what I'm
Yes.
going to say. The people who control the global system of the world, the banking system, aren't going to let this reset happen, these currency revalues happen, NESARA happen, unless they're forced to. They have to have some wins. So let's look at this win-win. Is there a win for the governments of the world if they allow this reset? There's certainly wins for the individuals, but here's what happens. Do you think that those governments didn't buy all of these suppressed currencies, knowing that the day was going to come when their fiat system was going to collapse and they were going to be to refinize, to recollateralize? So that's what happened when they took our gold, right, in 33. And now supposedly China's in the process of taking the gold from their people, so that's an indication that the financial system is going to be reset. So America, for example, I have based on really good intelligence, has warehouses of pallets full of dinar. And so when we trigger and we make a few million, the governments of the world, especially America, is going to make trillions. And what's that going to do? It's going to allow them to pay off, in the instance of America, large chunks of our $37 trillion national debt. We're paying $1 trillion a year in basically debt service to the central bank for what? Charging us money for printing money, charging us for our labor, which was unconstitutional and proven by 6 support cases. So what's happened? They make money when those currencies revalue. They make trillions. But then you made some millions and I made some millions and somebody made some billions. And the next thing you know, they got their hand out saying, you owe us taxes. So they just made more money. So basically, there's a win for everybody. There's a win for the bad guys. There's a win for us. But when it's all said and done, the power has shifted to our side because that new reset that's like Bretton but that takes us to NESARA. And that's what we'll talk about as we end this presentation.
Yeah. And let's just add a little caveat that part of NESARA says the destruction of the Federal Reserve and the IRS, which would be no taxes. So I would tend to think, just from common sense, that things were allowed to go forward at some point because of the intention of a lot of the bad guys making money. But I think, as we'll soon see, most of this wealth is going to go to the good guys as we go forward because of the systematic destruction of their institutions, which kept everyone in a debt slave model for so long.
Yep, we're going to get into that. So now this is something I know you know, and for your audience probably knows, but we're going to go just a little bit back about 3 or 4 years ago, if you next to this next slide,
Yep.
to the greatest show on earth, which was basically the Capitulation Tour, where Trump went around to all these nations, and all of a sudden things happen that never happened before. You go to Saudi Arabia, the crown prince is immediately arrested, a new crown prince, bin Solomon, is appointed, and you never, by tradition, allow anybody to hold that sword except the new crown prince. Trump's got the sword. You
Yeah.
go to England, which is
Can I
the super
interject something interesting? I'm so sorry, but what a lot of people don't realize with that sword dance, why it's so significant, is that on two levels. Number one, like you said, that you never let anyone hold it except for the crown prince, but it also represents that dance. That's what they would do before they went into battle. And so that dance was
Yeah,
a very
that's what the slide says right there. It says we're in
we're
war
going to
together.
war to get right. And I don't think a lot of people, and this to me is one of the most exciting things that ever happened, because between 2017 and 2018, when most of the unawakened, unaware, people were watching him go around the world, they just assumed it was another, head of state visiting all these countries and, doing kind of their political thing. But what most people don't realize, and I don't want to, step on what you're saying, but it's so exciting because everything was so well planned to go around and get, it's called the capitulation tour because that's exactly what it was. He went to all these places to let everyone know who's in charge, what's coming, how we're going to do this, and how this is basically going to save humanity from this slave system that we've been in. So I'm going to let you finish talking about individually what happened, but people need to understand just how significant this was, and all of these faux pas, if you will, walking in front of the Queen, and all these sitting in Winston Churchill's chair, and all these things that the media, which was of course controlled by the bad guys, were trying to make it sound like he didn't know protocol and he didn't know this. Trump doesn't do anything by accident. Everything he does has a well-intentioned meaning, whether it's his words or his actions. And this to me was one of the most amazing, exciting um, uh, acts of what was to come and what was being put to use. So anyway, I get really excited about this, but I'm going to turn it back over to you, Larry.
He was forecasting what's coming. So basically walks in front of the Queen. You never do that. Then he even stopped, turned his back on her and talked to one of her guards. And then Trump, now remember, we may think Russia's our enemy, but if you know history, Russia came to the aid of the United States on two separate occasions.
Yeah.
In the Civil War, England was going to come in on the side of the South, and Russia said, you do that, we're coming in on the side of the North. So Putin is an anti-globalist. There may be lots of things that make us our enemies, but we share the common hatred of the globalists. So that soccer ball supposedly contained information on some whistleblower information that we're going to find out about soon. And then you go to the Forgotten City. No dignitary has ever been invited to go there and have dinner. And then here's the sum of what had happened. Basically, when that was all done, he had passed the National Emergency Act 1381, I think it was, and basically said anybody who's racketeering, who's child trafficking, who's money laundering, we can take your money. And so basically, England, the Vatican, the World Bank, the IMF, the G7, NATO, the G20, the Fed, and China all capitulated. They all were presented with documents that said, we know the crimes that you've committed, and we basically are taking some of your money. We're negotiating deals. And so let me ask you a question. We talked about the foundation that gave us a bank to borrow money from, right? As this process happens and it's based on Bitcoin. Where did Trump get all that Bitcoin? How much did he pay for it?
Well, it kind of, again, my theory is always you go back to common sense. If he's going around and he's on a capitulation tour and he's taking down the bad guys, And then you say, as far as this National Emergency Act, right, that was implemented, I think it was 1381. Then you have all the executive orders, right, that gave him the right or gave us the right to go in and confiscate and take down all of their funds. Who was using Bitcoin at the time? It was the bad guys. So we're
So
taking.
basically, you just hit it. All of that is what is going to set our own bank up to borrow money from was all taken from the bad guys. So let's stop. So God promised us, I will transfer the wealth from the wicked to the righteous. This gives you tells you that's happening. But now we have a tangible example where we have a whole block of an asset that's very valuable that's going to underpin our new economic system. And it was all taken from the bad guys. Folks, open your eyes up. It's right there before you. Let's go on down to the next slide because we don't want to take this all day. Now, see, there you go. There's a transition slide. We're going to go into NESARA. Go to the next one. There it is. We're going to talk about NESARA, but basically, let's go to a slide that's going to give us some details. So we got to lay an understanding. So NESARA brings in a new economic system, and it gets us out from under the fiat system that basically is a Ponzi scheme where we have debt until we can't handle it, and then it collapses. But now the new system is based on all of our agricultural goods, all of our minerals. It's based on Bitcoin. It's based on cryptocurrency. It's not based upon just a decimal point in a computer. And what we're going to find in a minute is when you have things that have intrinsic value in themselves, you can't control them, you can't manipulate it, which leads to a steady state economy and peace and prosperity. That's the basis of what's queuing us up for NESARA. Let's go on down and we're going to go deeper into what you and Mel like to talk about. And that is when you have that system, you're not going to go out and take a gold coin that costs $3,000 and buy a loaf of bread. So what God showed me when I died in 68, that we were going to have this new economic system, but it couldn't be done back in 68 when I had my near-death experience, because it required some very sophisticated accounting and some very sophisticated technology. So we've been waiting for quantum computing. We've been waiting for nanites, for robots, for something called crypto, because now when we get into God's economy, to food, to tankers full of oil, to uranium, to gold, you have to be able to do something with it that you don't have to do on a fiat system that's based on nothing. You have to break it down. So when I was a kid, there was something called a mill. And the mill was 1/10 of a penny. It was plastic. And now they're taking the penny away. What's that telling us? The dollar is worthless. It's only worth about 3 cents. So as we bridge out of that worthless system into this system, we have to have a vehicle to take that $3,000 gold coin and buy a loaf of bread. That means that XRP enters the scene and allows us an XLM and other ISO 22022 compliant currencies so that we can break them down and buy a loaf of bread with the ability to fractionalize those commodities into the smallest financial component that we need to. And now, if we want another tell, basically the banks in Europe are already running XRP from peer to peer, and it's passed every test that they could possibly imagine. And basically, over in this country, what do we got? This is Crypto Week. All the legislation that's required in order to create the regulations to have this run the economy are being put in place right now. So basically, this is going to eventually, let's go back to that Bitcoin. What did that do? That allowed America to get out from under the Fed and be its own bank, right? Well,
Right.
guess what? That's what's happened for us.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to be our own banks. So basically, we're getting out of the control of the central banking system, doing just what Trump said. He's going to take us from the central banking system to a decentralized banking system, and that's going to kick in NESARA. So that's where we're moving, and that's going to give us freedom because we're no longer controlled by the centralized banking system of the global financial elite, and they can't control us and manipulate us because each one of these commodities that underpin this. They just said, for example, guess what? I used to work in real estate and I used to have my own brokerage firm. As of right now, you can go out and you want to buy a house. They will take in consideration the holdings that you have in cryptocurrencies as collateral for the purchase of that home. Are you seeing some sand footprints in the sand,
Right.
folks? Let's go on down. And in a minute, we're going to get to your chart, and then you chime in, and we'll break down NESARA in detail. But basically, this is what it is. We've been functioning with monopoly money. That's just a decimal point. Every dollar printed creates a new debt, and basically it traps us to where we never ever get out, and they can hold our wages down. This is what Trump is doing. This is something else you alluded to. Go to the next slide.
Hmm.
And he has queued up, to my understanding, has to go through Congress and get approved, but a new Declaration of Independence, not declared our declaration from Britain, but from what you were alluding to, from the corporation of the 1871. So I'm going to read this bottom part. Trusting our cause is just, and having prayed for the fortitude of brave spiritual weaknesses in high places, we, the citizens of America, make this announcement to the shareholders of the corporation, including the City of London, the British Crown, and the Vatican, and other operatives in the medium and government and society, a second Declaration of Independence for the 50 states of the United States of America. So we're giving notice to all the people who control the central banking system and enslave us. We're declaring a Declaration of Independence, and it's not going to be through a war this time. It's going to be through a transfer of the economic system, where basically the fiat system falls and a sound, stable economy is birthed, and it's birthed very quickly, and it changes everything.
Yeah.
So provisions are made. Go to the next slide, and I think it'll put a smile on your face.
And one thing, just a little history, in on July 4th, 2020, what most people don't realize, when they had the big celebration, I believe at Mount Rushmore, that's when this declaration was essentially, that was the year, if we all remember, when there was the celebration there, that this was, and of course, unbeknownst, excuse me, to a lot of people, that's what was done.
Mhm. And let's go forward. And I want to share something. I've got a dear friend who's going to be part of the 2050 Celebration Tour of America. And let me tell you a little bit about it. It's a multi-million-dollar endeavor. It's going to go to every state, and it's going to restore something. So let me go back in history. Joseph Stalin said, if we can undermine America's patriotism, its Christian and family values, it will fall from within, like decay, morally just decay, like Sodom and Gomorrah. So they're going to be going around and teaching people. There's going to be big bands to draw people in, but it's going to be a whole year of restoring our patriotism and making us proud of being Americans, of understanding the role that God had for America to basically be the shining light on the hill, to spread Christianity to the world, to be the beacon of the world, to be the basis, to be the nation that helped other nations. And we're going to get our true American history, and we're going to walk out of that year proud to be Americans, and with a whole new vantage point about who we are and who our government is and who God is. It's going to be amazing. It's a multi-million-dollar endeavor, and it is going to bring us to where we say, okay, we'll buy America, we'll build America, we believe in America, we're proud again to be Americans. But here's the slide that you wanted. So this is NESARA. I'll let you loose on it if you want, or I can break it down, whichever. But this is what you and Mel have been talking about for so long.
Yeah. So I think what people have to realize is that these changes, as we said, are not going to just happen. Like, let's just look at some of the little, what I would call breadcrumbs that we see. We've got during when Trump was doing a lot of his rallies, right? This goes back a few years. He's campaigning, he's doing rallies, little breadcrumbs like across the bottom of the screen. There was NESARA, GESARA, right? A lot of people didn't pick that up. When Trump was coming down the escalator, the famous thing, it says money exchange in the background. Was that an accident, or was that, a subliminal a message to people, right? And now you've got things like, oh, we're going to stop having, income tax on tips and overtime and all these little things. And that's why I keep, I was saying before that it's not going to just flip. everything is starting to happen. But when you look back, it's almost like the compound effect, right? If anybody knows what the compound effect is, if you are trying to lose weight and you stop eating sugar for a week, you're not going to see much, right? You maybe another 2 weeks, you might not see anything. But if you see that person, a couple of months down the road, you're going to go, wow, you look terrific. You really that not eating sugar has taken a real positive effect on how you look in your body. It's the same thing with NESARA. You're not going to see it as it's happening. But now we look back. Now we take a look, a few months from now, a year from now, and we're going to say all these things, whether it's the dissolution of the Fed and the IRS, whether it's, gold, gold and commodity-backed currencies, illegal debt forgiveness, right? All the things that we have debt with, our mortgages and the interest that we pay. So all of this we're going to start seeing. And I remember, quite ironically, because I was a follower of this for so many years and a believer, I remember talking to accountants and tax attorneys, because of what I did in my personal professional life, and saying, well, we're not going to have income taxes, and they would I was crazy, yeah, okay, but now look, who would have thought? Trump is out there saying we got to get rid of the Fed, we got to get rid of the IRS. So all of these things are just going to put us in such a position of having not only our sovereignty, but a position where we no longer have so much poverty around the world, and so many people that are, either dying because they don't have the money to take care of themselves, or in the case of people that we see every day that are dying of diseases. It irks me, it pains me, because there are these technologies, there are ways that we can live to 1,000 or 2,000 years old. And it sounds like space, when you talk to people, but this is the future that we are all in for. So I want to just, turn it back to you for you to add anything. And then I have another question for you.
Okay. I'm going to break it down. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a strategist. I break things down a little bit at a time. So let's start. So the Fed is going to be done away with. So how are we going to do that? Well, basically, it's real simple. We're going to go into that debt forgiveness. But first of all, we're going to go to a commodity-backed, gold-based system. And let me just run through what that means right off the top of my head. It means when we get into a gold-backed, commodity-backed system, unlike a fiat system backed by nothing, they can't inflate the currency. They can't deflate the currency. They can't have wage suppression. So our productivity over the last 50 years has gone double, triple, quadruple because of automation, right? But our wages actually have gone down because the dollar has become worth less, and we're basically paying more and more and more in the debt system. We're paying $1 trillion a year. So they've controlled us, and they can cause stock market crashes anytime they want. They said coming into 29, everything's okay. We're in the roaring 20s, and the next thing you know, a 10-year catastrophic depression. And then they're coming into 08 and say, everything's okay. Look at this. This is doing great. And then on Friday, Lehman Brothers says, we just collapsed and we have a catastrophic collapse. They can't do that. They can't manipulate, create a bubble, pop the bubble, take the money, and leave us holding the bank to pay everything, because each one of those things that underpin that currency have a value. And because they have a value and they have a role to play, you can't manufacture things without natural resources. You can't run an economy unless you have a logistics system. All those things are cogs in the wheel that are so intricate that under this new system, they can't manipulate them. So basically, the Fed is going to go away, and here's how. Let's give you some tangibles. So the government just got, in this scenario we've been talking about, trillions and trillions of dollars because of these currencies that reset, right? Well, that's money they can use to pay down the federal debt, right? And Trump is getting in billions from creating, instead of a trade system that causes us to lose money, we're getting, because we've got economic parity, we're making billions on trade. That can go to pay down the debt. And then we, individuals, we get these currencies and we get the crypto and we make money. And then the government gets taxes on that. That can go to pay down the debt. And then we go and we get a whole shift in the economy where we get these new these new energies, right, that are absolutely essential in order to run this new technological era, right? Well, that drops the cost of everything you ever bought, ever will buy in your life. It can be up to 50, 60, 70% of the cost of an item, depending on the complexity of the logistics system, is energy. So all of a sudden, we are going to buy things and they will cost us a fraction of what they cost. Your $30,000 car, when in the 50s, it was $3,000.
Right.
It's probably going to cost $3,000 again. Your $400,000 house in the 50s, when the dollar was worth a dollar, was 40,000 or maybe even 20,000. All of these things are going to change. All these things are going to create economic momentum that's going to allow us to, instead of going further and further into debt, to start paying the debt off. Now, I don't think we'll pay the debt off completely, because you have to look at the debt in two levels. There's the illegal debt that's imposed upon us because of the printing of our currency, right? But there's other debts, those are contractual debts. I buy a house, I'll buy a car, I buy whatever. That's a contract between me and somebody else. Those debts are not going to go away. But the national debt that costs us $1 trillion is going to go away. And let's go into a little bit more of how Trump is going to create that soft collapse by taking us into this crypto system, by having the stable coin. What he's going to do is he says, we're going to make America the crypto capital of the world. Here's what he's doing. He's saying to all those nations out there, Xi Jinping said, oh, Trump, you just screwed up royally. He said, you're going to be isolated. All the nations of the world are going to leave you and come and buy from us, and we're going to be super prosperous. 150 nations signed, raised their hands and said, Trump, we're with you. We'll negotiate.
Yeah.
And so basically they're the ones bleeding out and we're doing better. So now there's going to be massive amounts of money coming in, because what happens? What was the genesis of wealth? Remember, it was natural resources turned into goods, sold, and that created the money. So all of a sudden, that's what China's been doing to build their gleaming cities. But guess what? Now the money's not going to China. Now we have pledges already, because of the tariff pressure that Trump put on, for $10 trillion. So all of a sudden, we just got another $10 trillion. We're paying down that debt. Gone. Bam, 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 bam. And now we're coming to a situation where America is almost virtually debt-free and has massive amounts of growth coming in. And it's buy America, build America. And what's he say to this 150 nations? Ah, shucks. You don't want to pay those tariffs? No problem. Just come build it here in America. And we're going to change our tax structures. And we're going to extend the tax cuts that I created initially. And we're going to give you a $1.5 trillion additional tax cuts. So come to America. You'll have no tariffs. You'll have the cheapest taxes in the world. And you and us will all prosper. That's what's coming. And that's what's basically we're walking into. Then with that happening, and without the debt over us, then the cost of running the country is minimal. So we go back in history, and how did we run the nation eventually? We're just going to go back to what we had. We didn't have the Fed. We didn't have federal income tax. We didn't have personal property tax. And there are already states that are eliminating personal property tax. We're going to eliminate the federal income tax. Well, that's 35% more money in your pocket right now, plus whatever outrageous amount you pay for property tax. When I lived in Chicago in a golf course, I paid $12,500 a year for property tax.
Really,
so that's
Larry?
coming back.
Really?
Yes.
In my neighborhood, okay, that I had to come across the border after I got my divorce, my property taxes were $33,000 a year.
Oh, you're a snob. What can I say?
33,000. And by the way, depending on what kind of house you have in that area, it's higher. Like depending on where it's absurd. You know, Long Island is just ridiculous. If you take that as a little microcosm of how absurd everything has gotten with the property taxes. And by the way, that doesn't include all the other things they bang us for every day for things we have to pay and all of these different regulations that they put into effect so that you have to pay for this and you have to pay for that and you have to pay for this. Like it's absurd, all of these things that a wealthy nation we have sent all our money into the pockets of all these criminals, basically, this Ponzi scheme mafia.
Well, let me tell you how it works. So basically, we ran our whole country without all the taxes on a simple sales tax. And it wasn't that the sales tax was applied over and over again on an automobile that's sold 4 times and everybody pays taxes. Yep. So Here's what they did and how they were able to do it. So when we got under the Fed, here's what happened. We were no longer run by a simple sales tax. And what happened is the Fed, which is the global financial elite, charged us income tax. It's only going to be 1%, folks. It's no big deal. Well, now it's 35%. So basically, what happens is our national debt goes up and up and up and up and up. And eventually we get to where the money coming in to the Fed from that 35% illegal tax is no longer enough to pay the interest to the Fed. So we're paying $1 trillion a year now. So you know what they do? They create some new taxes, like say inheritance tax. So generations have worked to build a factory, to build a company, and it's taken from them because they can't afford to pay the taxes. That's called a progressive tax of communism. And then on top of that, what happens is now they run out of money. The money they bring into the Fed isn't enough. So they created new taxes, and that isn't enough. So now they have to raise those taxes. So what do the Democrats want to do as this last election is coming up? Raise the taxes.
Yep.
So when we get rid of all of that through all the mechanisms I just said, we pay down the debts, we can run the nation on a simple sales tax. And it's not going to be on everything. It's not going to be on food. It's not going to be medicine. It's not going to be essentials. And it's not going to repeat over and over and over again. So you're not going to have to buy that boat and then pay a tax on it every year. And all these other sort of nonsense taxes that enslave us are going to go away. Now let's go over to the other side. Reinstate our Constitution. So basically, here's how they control us there. They basically use the corrupt judges that they put in place to basically control us. And what do? They pass verdict on a case, and that creates precedents. And then the next time something comes up, they say that's precedence.
Right.
So let's give you a very important example of how that is killing this nation. We are going to have a census in 2030. And here's what they're doing behind the scenes. You need to understand the underbelly of the enemy. They're saying, based on precedents, Donald Trump asked in the last census to not count anything other than citizens. And they said, no, the precedence is that we've counted everybody in the past, but we've never had a situation where we had 20 million people come in. But we did have a situation where from 1924 to 1965, we didn't even have legal immigration because we said it cost us too much money to bring all those poor people in and put them on entitlement programs, and they couldn't assimilate fast enough. So here's what those whatever. Here's what they're doing to us. The next census, they brought all those people in, and they're sending them to purple states, and they're sending them to swing states, and they're all going to be counted if we don't stop it. And what that's going to do is it's going to flip purple states and swing states to blue, and we're going to lose seats in the House, and it's going to give electoral college votes to the Democrats, and it's going to give massive amounts of additional money because you get the money from the federal government based on the number of people in your state. And so before we even get to vote, cast our vote, if we don't come in and change that, they're already going to have won the election because they will have flipped the votes without us even knowing it through illegal immigration. So that's another thing that they're barreling in here, and that's also going to change because Trump is already working on getting that done. So
can I
should I go on and finish this?
Sure. The other aspect of that we have to remember also is that part of NESARA is also to go back to common law. Okay, so a lot of these precedents that you talk about fall under maritime law, which is all part of the bar. And from what I've heard and what through my own channels is that a lot of the bar, which comes from England, right? That a lot of that is sort of already being kind of done away with, and that there's a plan under NESARA that now our advocates or lawyers, however you want to refer to them, will now be retrained under common law in addition to the judges. So clearly, I believe what you just said could have been or was their plan. I don't personally think that's ever going to happen because we know that as this is being rolled out, we're going to be living in a very different kind of world. And to your point before about how all of these taxes weren't able to pay for the debt, well, let's remember that most of our taxes that were collected via the IRS, which is basically a collection arm, and a Puerto Rican corporation that is working for the Fed didn't even go to our country, right? We know that that went elsewhere and that went, so it wasn't even going towards any kind of debt. It was going to line the pockets of the elite and, which is a whole show we could do in itself. But I think the happy news or the good news is that we're going to be seeing that a lot of these structures are going to be destroyed, just like we talked about the de-dollarization. All of these structures that we have come to be enslaved by are going to go away. So you might not even have precedents anymore because that whole legal system that is basically a way to control us and collect money from us is going to be dismantled as well. But go ahead.
That's where I was going. Basically, what we were saying is that we're going to go back to the tax system we had, sales tax. We're going to have a new Declaration of Independence. And look at the top bullet point on the right. We're going to have a new constitution. We're going to go back to our original constitution because all these laws based on precedents were nothing more than intentionally undermining the constitution, creating a legal dictatorship. So as this unfolds, there's more to it than about money. We're going to get rid of a 2,700 plus page constitution and go back to our simple constitution, get out from under admiralty law and go to the system of government and the system of economics that this nation was founded on, that made America the youngest nation in the world, the wealthiest nation in the world. We're almost done. And then increased benefits to seniors. That's just a benefit. We paid into it. They rated Social Security. We're not going to get compensated. And the number that I've heard is that most people are going to get around $4,500, which is a livable amount of money compared to the pittance that a lot of people are getting. And requires, this is the essence of it. You cannot have a stable economy, global stable economy, unless there's a requirement to participate in this. Stand down your military. Let's have peace and prosperity, which is easy to do when every nation has relative economic parity, and then release those 6,000 patents so that we can build manufacturing, bring in all kinds of technological revolutions that are going to basically prosper the world in ways we can't see. That's NESARA. That's the quantum system. So here's how it comes. The many paper, we talked about an analogy we had. Let's go to the next slide, see what the next slide is. Yeah, let's talk about this next slide, and then we're going to go back to where we started, and we're going to make sure people understand how they can little by little get into this. And when we get to NESARA, they're very happy. So when we go to this new system, and it's not based on fiat currency, Voltaire said, the ultimate value of all currency is zero. It's monopoly money. So what's going to happen is when we go to this new economic-based system that's based on commodities that requires quantum financial system, XRP, blockchain, they'll no longer be able to inflate, deflate, cause weight suppression, cause stock market collapses, cause boom bust, cause national consumer debt, cause poverty and division, and cause chaos throughout the world. It's gone. Their control mechanism is gone. He who controls money controls the world. They no longer control the money. They no longer control the world. All the 8 spheres of influence are given back to we the people, and our democracy was never a democracy. We are a republic. Our republic is restored. Our constitution is restored. Our economic system is restored. And here's the thing, God. We're not going anything new. All of that is just who we were and what our governmental system was in the first place. We're just going back to safe ground where we started, to the nation that made us great, to the system that made us great. So I want you to look at it and say, it's not pie in the sky. It's just restoration. That's all it's all it is restoration. So we got a couple of more slides. I know we've been on this a long time, so I'm going to try to speed up. Let's go to the next slide.
This is just one, and I don't remember if I accidentally said, I hope I said admiralty law, or if I said military law, it might have been, but I meant admiralty law if I said that. Okay. Transfer.
That's okay. They understand. So the transfer will occur in stages. This is what we were talking about, right?
Yes.
As necessary requirements are met. So that's that check. We said, Vietnam, I'm going to check, 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 check. Then the currencies can revalue. So currencies will revalue as the criteria are met. So it's a very logical process. As fiat currency is abandoned, gold and silver will be revalued. So here's what's going to happen. The currencies are going to be collapsed. So what God has having me do this particular presentation for is we're not looking at the people who've been awake like for years, like Elisa, the people who've had a lot of money to invest. God says, I want to transfer the wealth from the wicked to the righteous. So there's a lot of righteous people out there who under this system don't have much money. So God wants to give them an opportunity to multiply their wealth over and over. So let's say that you choose to, on your own, I'm not a financial advisor, to spend $60 and buy some dong, and it becomes worth 2 million. Well, now there's other currencies out there that have to meet those criteria, right? So some of them are going to revalue a little later. And now if you take the money that you made and don't squander it, you might buy some more currencies that are coming, right? And now you've got more money to invest, and God is multiplying your money. Oh, did he ever multiply anything? Let's see now. I think there was a sermon sometime, and there were about 5,000 hungry people, and he had a loaf of bread, and he had a fish, and he fed them all. So can he multiply your assets? You bet your bit he can, but he needs you to be part of the process. So now let's go to the next step. So now what's happening is those currencies are revaluing. You're dipping in, and you're getting a little bit here and a little bit there. That cheese is moving, and each time it moves, you go to where it goes and you take a little nibble and you become more prosperous. So here's something that's happening that goes into the crypto market. Now, this is speculative. I want to be careful when I say this, but here's what happens. People are greedy. Something goes up, they sell it, take a profit, and they put the money someplace else. Does that sound like human nature?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going into what they call the altcoin season for those people who are in crypto. We are reaching the point where you see the massive increases that are happening in Bitcoin are slowing down. And when they get to a point and meet a resistance, the people are going to come out and then they're going to take profits, and they want to put that money someplace, and they know that the dollar is devaluing rapidly. So they're going to throw it over into crypto and hope that they can put it over there into meme coins that have no value except for the greed of people. And now I happen to have bought one called Shiba, quite a bit of it. And I believe that as we go through this season and money leaves Bitcoin, it's going to flow over. And then at some point, they're going to say, all right, this went up, this went up, this went up, and greed, and they're going to sell. So I'm going over and I'm saying I've got triggers set where when we reach certain little platforms, they're going to settle a little, 10%, 10%, 20%, cash out. And I'm going to feed at that cheese that got moved one more time. And so now I'm just going down and letting God prosper me a little at a time. And I'm accumulating money. And then now what's going to happen is we're going to go to gold and silver. And basically we're going to restore things. All we're doing is restore things. There was always an intrinsic difference between gold and silver. 16 silver coins bought you 1 gold ounce. And so if you look at that revalue and getting restored back to where it was, silver is probably going to go to $150 to $200. So, but now let's look at that, and you'll see why I told you not to buy silver, but to buy the dong, because now you're going to pay $30 or $35 for silver, and it might go up to $200, but you might pay $60 for 1 million dong and get $2 million.
Right.
So I'm trying to give you the biggest win first, and then let you nibble at the cheese as we go down, getting wealthier and wealthier, taking the money you've invested back each time and taking your profit and reinvesting a portion of it. And so now we've gone through the currencies, and now we've gone through the alt-call season, and now we've gone through the revaluation of the silver and the gold, and that creates the basis for our new economic system. And what's left? The cryptos, the real cryptos.
XRP.
What's left is XRP and XLM. And guess what? In my opinion, it has to go last, and here's why. Because it's the new rails for the new system. So the new system has to have already come into fruition before this can really kick off. So just like they've held silver down for decades, they're holding XRP down. But now our tell is we are in crypto week, where these new cryptocurrency bills are getting passed, setting the foundation for regulating crypto so that it can be treated like a bank, so that it can be, you can buy a house with it, you can buy anything you want with it, so it becomes a replacement for the fiat system. And so now it's going to trigger, and that's where the real wealth is going to come. God told me in 4 years ago, he came to me and he said, I promised you that I would let you have the harvest of soul. And when the transfer of wealth came, Here's where you're going to get your seed. He said, go find out what crypto is. I didn't even know what crypto was. I'm an old guy. I don't play in that market. So then he came back and he said, okay, you know what crypto is now? And he said, now here's what I'm going to tell you. I want you to find out about something called XRP. It's going to be the new financial system of the world. It's going to be the new world's reserve currency. And exactly that is unfolding before us right now today. So as all these regulations kick into place, he said to me on top of that, no private citizen has ever in the history of the world been able to invest one dime in what was the world's reserve currency. That was held for the elite. So now he said, my children will have a chance to not eat the crumbs from the table, but to eat the delicacies of the world. I am giving you an opportunity to do something that you've never had an opportunity to do. Invest in the very thing that the elite have kept you from investing in. So that's where we end this journey with massive amounts of money that you never have to trade this in. If you get enough, you can treat it as your own bank. And if you had enough of it, let me give you an example. You could go out and buy a brand new $1 million house and our $400,000 house or whatever, and don't take more than 10% of what you've got banked, and the 90% that's in there would pay off the payments on that house, so that you would have just bought yourself a piece of real estate and it never cost you a penny because your original asset was never touched. That's what's going to happen when we go into this system and all the regulations are changed and it can be treated as a bank. And what is Ripple doing right now? Now that they've got all their network put in place, they're applying for what? To become a bank.
Yeah.
So basically, that then fully installs NESARA. It fully changes the system, but it's not new. It's just back to what it was to begin with. And it's based on God's economic system that cannot be manipulated, that cannot be controlled. So now we've talked about these currencies. If we go to the next slide, you're going to understand exactly what we've been talking about. So up at the top are the first world hegemony countries that have held the third world countries down. That means that in this process, their currencies are going to be going down. That means the dollar is going to go down. The Chinese currency is going to go down. The EU is going to go down. Japan's going to go down. Britain's going to go down. Their currencies are all going to drop. But as the third world countries get an economic system based on commodities and they are rich in commodities and they get their infrastructure, their currencies are going to go up. So these are the currencies that we see are going to be revalued. All of the 54 nations in Africa, Vietnam in Asia, India right across from them, Venezuela when they get some economic or political stability, Iraq and Brazil. Those are the currencies you're looking at to track to see when does that one meet the criteria. When does that one meet? And then you can say, okay, now I can go put a little bit of money towards that currency. So that's what God is unfolding, and it's right there. And what does that do? That creates the steady state where there's no war, and where Eisenhower, what he said is true, that the principal cause of war is discrepancies between economic standards between nations. And now what does that do? That takes us back to Bretton Woods. We've been having a new Bretton Woods, and people haven't known it. They haven't seen it, where we created a stable economy. So what happens with these revaluation of these currencies? They're junk now. They can't be traded on the Forex, but when they meet those criteria, they're no longer junk. So now they can be traded internationally across the world. And so as these kick in one by one, we're creating a new Bretton Woods, a new international trading system based on stable currencies, based on commodities, based on God's economic system. And there we go. We go to the next slide. And what happens is we get control of the money, peace and prosperity washes over the world. And then we go back to that last slide, except I want to talk about my book. And I just want to say, think about what you've seen. Come back and watch this if you need to. And maybe it's not a far reach to say, if you bought into this, I'm hoping for your sake, you'll be willing to risk $60 to maybe make 2 million. I mean, that's an unbelievable opportunity. Maybe you'll be able to believe that God wants to bless his children. And then maybe you'll see now the blueprint that we've laid out for you. So you can take a little and turn it into more and more. Oh, that takes us back to the Bible again. That's that story about the rich man who leaves and he gives his servants money and he says, I'll come back. And what did they do? Some of them buried it in the ground, and he took it from them and gave it to the ones that invested in him. So I'm hoping that you won't be that servant that has what you have taken away, the little that you have, but I hope that you'll invest and God will put the seed in the ground that will allow God to multiply you. And when you do that, when that happens, I hope you'll bend your knee and you will say, God, I know that you, a supernatural, all-knowing, all-loving God, prospered me and prospered this nation and prospered my children. And thank you. And we will have what this is all intended to be. It's not about the money. Money can be great, but it can be the root of all evil. It's about causing mankind to bend their knee to God and give him the credit for what has happened. And we usher in the greatest spiritual awakening the world has ever seen. And then the true wealth comes in, and that is spiritual enlightenment. That's where this journey ends, not in giving us money, but in giving us time where we're not working 60 hours a week, where there's not a husband and wife working, but just one, and where we have time for personal development and spiritual development. So with that, let's go to the last thing, and then let's have you wrap it up for us. So right now is a pinnacle time. I want people to know we are not and never have been a democracy. A democracy is mobocracy, and it is basically, Franklin said it, the minute those least willing or least able to work understand they can take money from the public coffers, that would be entitlements, folks. It's just a matter of time till the economy collapses and the government's basically in ruins. So that's what we need to understand. We're not a democracy. We are a republic. And most people don't even know what a republic is.
Right.
So everything you need to know that will make you a proud American, make you willing to stand up and able to stand up and help usher all this in, is in this book. It will tell you that we are a republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It carries a certain set of requirements that you be educated, that you be informed. That means we have to have the truth that Mel is talking about, that you be a citizen of mankind, that you be willing to vote for what's in the best interest of the nation as a whole and not yourself. And when that happens, spirituality rings out, prosperity rings out. And so you need to know that then that's who God made us to be, the shining light in the hill, and to be that example economically, morally, and spiritually. And so what did Stalin say about America, the greatest nation in the world? If we can undermine their patriotism, their Christian and family values, they'll fall apart from within. But what we're going to do is go back in and not only restore our money, but we're going to restore what? Our Christian values, and turn to God and give him the credit. So you need to know what's in this book, because it tells you what made America great, how we've squandered it and lost it, how we're about to get it back, and how we keep it when we get it back. This is a book that you need to read to give to people that you know, especially those who are not on board with God's kingdom assignment, so that we can win some souls. So please buy this book, not to make me rich, but so that you can join the army that is going to bring freedom back to the world. Back to you.
So folks, if you want to take a shot of this QR code, I'll leave this up for a minute, and we're going to put in the description box. We'll also have the link and Larry's information if you want to get in touch with him. This was incredible. This was really incredible.
Can I ask you to do one more thing? Go back up one slide and let them take a picture of where they can go to buy the dinar if they decide to.
Of course. Yeah, if you want to repeat that. So
you
as you said, you can go into the bank if you're lucky enough to have a bank that is still and will currently sell the junk currencies, as we've called them. But there's also, you can go online to this site, which is exchangeofamerica.com. So you might want to take a screenshot of this. And as you said, there might be a little more in fees, but you're still talking about, think about $60. We waste that. We waste that on nonsense, and for that type of return, it's just a no-brainer, and And even if it wasn't two, even if it was one, even if it was a 500,000, like what would that do to your life, and to what you're doing? So, Larry, I can't thank you enough. I love having you on. We always just get into such amazing conversations, and your slide presentations are so well done and so helpful. So, I think on that note, I think we've covered just about everything on this reset that we're
You're
hoping to
one of the
happen.
few
Let me
people I
ask you
do
one
shows
last
with.
question. We spoke,
Mhm. Okay.
ad nauseum about the fact that nothing's going to happen, with the flip of a switch. And I don't like to get into to timing, but is this something that you see is going to the revaluation within the next year?
Ah, let me see. Anybody ever heard of a dude called Kim Clement?
Yes.
I've met him and I followed him, and I believe that people got it all wrong. He started making prophecies about Donald Trump in '07, and then he made prophecies about when things were going to happen, and everybody wanted it so bad that they thought it was going to happen. Bang, bang, bang. No, they didn't understand. Here's what I'm going to lay it out according to what Tim Clement's prophecies laid out for us. He said basically Donald Trump was the man he saw in the fog. He couldn't see his face. He was going to be president. He was going to come in as a non-believer and go out as a praying president. And there would be two terms and that separation in between that had to happen. So what happened that I know because of the things you were saying is maybe we'll find out he really won that election, but that's beside the point. What I believe we will find out is that the Biden was a puppet, and he was there to basically do egregious things to open our eyes, drip, drip, drip. And when you have, according to our Constitution, a foreign government in control of the government, basically the president in that instance can assume the position of what? Commander in
Commander in
chief of the
chief.
military.
Yeah.
I believe Trump was not president, but commander in chief and calling the shots from behind
And
the
he told
scenes.
us that numerous times. He said, I'm your
And
commander
the
in
drip,
chief.
the drip, drip, drip,
Yeah.
the things that you talked about the capitulation, that was him telling us, I'm in control. We have declared martial law. We're under a state of emergency, and these things are being done to open your eyes, because what he wanted to do was not have a civil war. So let's go back to something we were talking about as we wrap this up for you. How are we going to end up not having a civil war? We have to do something that's very important. We have to recognize we let millions of people in here, let them stay. If we don't address the dreamer issue, we will have a civil war. So
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a real simple solution to the immigration angst that's happening. Create changes that allow most of the people to decide to self-deport. And when NESARA kicks in, that will help them decide to self-deport.
Yep.
We're going to take out the bad guys, but here's what we have to do to not have, in the meantime, a mass insurrection. We have to basically say something like this: from a certain date, whatever it is, 2019, whatever, anybody who can show proof that they were in that country before that time, before this mass entrance came in, you can get a G on your driver's license for grandfather, and you don't ever have to be worried about your children being deported or you being deported, because we carry responsibility for having let you come and stay. So we can basically, this whole thing can be a smooth landing, both economically and culturally, and we can walk into the greatest miracles you ever want. So back to Kim Clement. So
Mhm.
what Kim Clement says is that there'll be a chaotic spring and summer. Whoa, unbelievable weather, earthquakes, the war in Iraq and Russia, and so I mean, pure chaos. And then we'll move into the fall and the fall of falls. So as we get control of things, and as this system starts to churn up and turn in our favor, we're going to get the whistleblowers, and Trump will get the opportunity to be heard in court to prove that the election was stolen, and all of the kinds of things will be coming out. And that again takes the people and opens their eyes so that they can see the truth. So we have a peaceful transition. right? So that's the fall and the fall. And then he says basically we'll be happy by the winter time. So let's break that down. So we got these currencies that are already queued up to
Yep.
basically start transferring. We're getting money, the system's changing. Maybe the silver goes, but now we go to the Holy Grail. That's the implementation of SARA. That's the implementation of the ISO 2 2022 compliancy currencies. So what's going to happen there? That's not going to happen immediately. And here's why. They are just now passing the regulations with the Genius Bill and these that are going to give the structure that that system can be fully implemented, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen in a day. That's going to take a few months. So if we follow Kim Clements and what he's saying, that we're going to be going into the late fall, like in the November timeframe, and we're going to see that start to happen. And by Christmas, it'll all have happened. We'll be happy. We'll be celebrating the Christmas. So my best guess, based on the events that I see pragmatically happening and the prophecy that I see coming from Kim Clement, is we're going to go through this angst. We're going to go through this financial dip and then back up. But by Christmas of this year, I think most of this will be over. Now, it's still going to take some time to reestablish the economy. We have been grievously wounded, but the bulk of the transfer that's going to reestablish America and let us do what? Rebuild our manufacturing. And we got $10 trillion committed to rebuild it. Will all be in place, and the mechanism to get those free energy devices will come, and America will basically be restored. And it's going to happen even faster in Africa and third world nations. And then when all of that happens, we as a species are going to evolve. Our whole being is going to change. Our vibrational rate is going to raise, and we're going to realize that it wasn't the money. It's the opportunity to have spiritual growth. So to answer your question, I think it's all going to be over by the end of the year as far as the big bad stuff. And then it's just a process to rebuild. That'll take time. And I believe Kim Clement nailed it. And I believe as we look at what we see happening, it all aligns up with what he said. So that's the best answer I can give to your
Yeah.
question.
And of course, none of us know. We're speculating, I mean, you can't count on things before they happen. That's just common sense, right?
Mhm.
But that's if you look at that, that's kind of falls in line with a lot of what we've heard, and what's out there and time frames and years. But this was amazing. I want to thank you so much for sharing all this, and hopefully we're
You're
helping
welcome.
people to figure out how to increase some of their financial wellness so that they can live more free and enjoy life rather than constantly be in that on that hamster wheel of debt. So, all right, well,
Before
thanks,
we sign
Sarah.
out,
Yeah,
before you sign out, I got to correct one thing. I want to basically punctuate one thing.
yeah,
We said it's not going to happen overnight, right? Well, one aspect of it will. And that is once all these regulations are put in place and once they're ready to basically take us into NESARA and take us into the new economic system, that'll all have been run in the background, everything will have been tested.
yeah,
And what Brad Garlinghouse is telling us all along, when we get to the point that we're going to go on the new system, the new rails, XRP, XLM, NESARA, at that point, those incremental gains in wealth that you've got will have given you the money to invest. But if you haven't invested in those final components, in that transfer over to the new rails, to be able to be invested in what's going to be the world's reserve currency, they'll flip that switch, and in one day you will be priced out. So as you begin to make these monies off of following that cheese, if you
very
do
true.
your homework, I'm not a financial advisor. If you do your homework and you come to believe that that is going to be the new world's reserve currency, don't wait too long to start buying as much XRP and XLM as you can, because when that goes, it's not like exactly like the others. It will flip when implementation is ready, and one day it'll flip, and basically one day we'll be priced out. So that's your path. That's your blueprint for being participants in God's economic system, and hopefully then we'll give God the credit for what's happened. And I want to say that you're just about the only person I do shows with that can actually contribute to the conversation. So
Thank you.
it's a pleasure to do shows with you. So I think we did it. I'll turn
so.
it back to you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
I
no,
didn't
of
want
course.
to leave without making that punctuation for people.
Yeah, I think it's an important one, so I'm glad you did make it. So, all right, well, listen, till we do our next show, you have a wonderful day, and I think I hope that this show really brought some happiness and encouragement for the future, because when you're living in all this chaos, it can be daunting, and that's why we always get together to kind of unpack and take a look and decode a lot of this stuff. So, thank you again.
I just thought one more thing. If you got a relative that you'd like to bless, a friend you'd like to bless, just anybody in the world you'd like to bless, share this message. Get this out there far and wide, because what we want to do is we want to open up the eyes of the people. We want to bless them. We want them to be a part of this. So why God told me to do this is he's leaving the 99 and coming after the one. So do your part. Stand up, share this message, encourage these people to find out what's coming on so that they can be blessed as this happens. To bless your neighbors, be the steward that you were meant to be, to steward mankind and to help everybody you know. So spread this word so they can be blessed, just like hopefully you will be blessed by this.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. We'll see you
You're
soon.
welcome. Bye-bye.